The silver spacecraft landed silently in the Mojave Desert at midnight. Its metal surface cooled quickly in the night air as a tall figure stepped out onto Earth's soil. This was Xara, a young scout from the powerful Centaurian Empire. Her blue skin glowed faintly under the desert stars. Xara looked around with her 3 eyes, each one scanning different parts of the desert. She was here to complete her final test, to study Earth and decide if it was worth conquering. The Centaurians always sent their youngest scouts for these missions. They believed primitive worlds were perfect for training. "This world is even more backward than I thought," Xara said to herself. She pulled out her scanner, watching the holographic display show information about Earth. The device told her that humans still used fossil fuels, hadn't colonized other planets, and lived in scattered cities instead of unified megastructures. The young scout walked across the desert sand, her boots making soft crunching sounds. The temperature was dropping fast, but she didn't worry. Her environmental suit would protect her from any weather this primitive planet could throw at her. Looking east, Xara saw distant lights from a small human town. Her lips curved into a small smile. The Centaurian Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds, and Earth looked weaker than most. She had chosen this desert region for her assessment because surely, if humans couldn't even live properly in their harsh areas, they wouldn't be able to resist the Empire. Xara set up her base camp, watching as her equipment assembled itself into a small dome. Inside, she began writing her first report. Earth shows minimal signs of advancement. Humans still struggle with basic environmental challenges. Their scattered settlements in harsh regions like this desert show poor adaptation skills. As she worked, the wind outside grew stronger. Dust began to blow past her dome, but Xara paid no attention. Her sensors would warn her of any real danger. She was more interested in planning tomorrow's observations. The council will be pleased, she thought, imagining her promotion after this easy mission. This world won't take more than a standard cycle to conquer. But as night turned to dawn, Xara didn't notice how the wind patterns were changing. She didn't see the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. And most importantly, she missed the signs that an experienced desert dweller would have recognized immediately. A massive sandstorm was coming. The young scout went to sleep in her comfortable pod, dreaming of glory, completely unaware that the desert was about to teach her its first harsh lesson about Earth and its people. The real test was just beginning, and it wasn't the one she had planned for. Sarah Martinez was tracking a lost hiker when she first saw the strange blue woman. 20 years of desert rescue work had taught her to notice anything unusual, and this definitely counted as unusual. She crouched behind a rock, watching through her binoculars as the alien examined a cactus with some kind of glowing device. "Well, that's different," Sarah muttered to herself, adjusting her worn cowboy hat. The morning sun was already hot, but she had grown up in this desert. Her father and grandmother had taught her every trick for surviving here. Knowledge passed down through generations. Xara was frustrated. Her scanners weren't working properly. Something about the mineral content in the rocks was interfering with the readings. She kicked at a small cactus, then jumped back as its spines pierced her boot. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," a voice called out. "Jumping Chala doesn't like to be disturbed." The alien spun around, seeing a human woman in dusty clothes walking towards her. Sarah moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew every rock and dip in the landscape. She carried only a small backpack and what looked to Xara like primitive equipment, a water bottle, rope, and some basic tools. "How long have you been watching me?" Xara demanded, trying to sound authoritative despite her throbbing foot. "Long enough to see you're not from around here," Sarah replied calmly. She pointed at the sky. "And speaking of things you should know about, there's a nasty storm coming." Xara glanced up and laughed. "My environmental shields can handle any weather on this primitive planet." Sarah shook her head. "This isn't just weather. This is a haboob, a massive dust storm. Even the old-timers get worried when they see clouds like that." The alien activated her scanner again, pointing it at the distant clouds. The device showed nothing dangerous, Your concern is unnecessary. My technology is far superior to anything you could understand. Technology's great until it isn't, Sarah said, checking her watch. You've got about 30 minutes before that storm hits. My shelter's about 2 miles east. You're welcome to join me. Sarah straightened up, her pride stung. I have my own shelter, with proper filtration systems, unlike your primitive caves. Sarah shrugged and turned to leave. Suit yourself, but if those fancy shields fail, look for the rock formation shaped like a bear's head. I'll leave a light on. She started walking away, her boots leaving clear prints in the sand. The alien watched her go, then turned back to her readings. She had a mission to complete, and she wasn't about to let some local human tell her what to do. Above them, the storm clouds grew darker, and the wind began to pick up speed. The storm hit faster than Sarah expected. One moment she was checking her equipment, the next moment the world turned dark brown. The wind screamed across the desert, carrying sand that stung like tiny needles. Her shield flickered blue, then started to sputter. Impossible, she muttered, tapping at her wrist controls. The reading showed her shields were failing. The sand wasn't just dirt. It carried traces of metals and minerals that were interfering with her technology. Static electricity crackled around her, making her blue skin tingle uncomfortably. Then everything went dark. Her shields died completely, along with all her other equipment. The sand hit her like thousands of tiny bullets, forcing her to cover her eyes. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, and the wind was so strong it knocked her off her feet. Sarah tried to walk back to her shelter pod, but she had lost all sense of direction. The storm had transformed the familiar landscape into an alien world. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, an advanced alien, was now the one feeling lost on this primitive planet. She stumbled through the storm, her throat burning with each breath. Her species wasn't built for this kind of environment. Without her technology, she was more vulnerable than any human. The sand filled her boots, got under her clothes, and made her eyes burn. Just when panic started to set in, she saw a faint light. It was moving, bobbing up and down in the brown darkness. A voice carried through the howling wind. This way. Follow the light. It was Sarah Martinez, wearing a thick scarf around her face and carrying an old-fashioned storm lantern. She had come back to look for the alien, knowing exactly what would happen to advanced electronics in a storm like this. Take my hand, Sarah shouted, reaching out. Sarah grabbed it without hesitation, her earlier pride forgotten. The human's grip was strong and sure as she led them through the storm. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Sarah moved with confidence, using landmarks Sarah couldn't even see. Finally, they reached the bear-shaped rock formation Sarah had mentioned earlier. Inside a hidden cave entrance, Sarah helped the alien sit down. Sarah was shaking, covered in sand, and completely humbled. Her expensive environmental suit was torn in several places, and every piece of technology she carried was dead. Hot tea, Sarah offered, already heating water on a small gas stove. Nothing better after a haboob. While we wait for the storm to pass, I can teach you how humans have survived out here for thousands of years. Looks like you might need those lessons. Sarah nodded silently, watching as Sarah moved around the cave with practiced ease. Everything the human did was simple but effective. No fancy technology, just generations of accumulated wisdom about living in one of Earth's harshest environments. The storm raged outside, but in that simple cave, an alien began to learn her first real lessons about human strength. First rule of the desert: water is life, Sarah explained as she dug into the sand beneath a small cactus. It was dawn, and they had left the cave after the storm passed. Sarah watched with curiosity as the human used a simple plastic tube to extract moisture from the ground. "There's water here, in this sand?" Sarah asked, her 3 eyes blinking in surprise. Her own water purifier had been destroyed in the storm, along with most of her other equipment. Sarah nodded, offering the tube to the alien. Desert survivors know how to find water in places most people would never look. The Native Americans who lived here first taught these techniques to my ancestors. They spent the morning moving through the desert. Sarah showed Sarah how to spot signs of underground water, which plants stored drinkable liquid, and how to collect morning dew using just a piece of cloth. The alien was amazed at how humans had turned their weakness, their need for constant water, into a deep understanding of their environment. "Your technology is impressive," Sarah said, checking the position of the sun. "But out here, it's better to know the land than to rely on machines. The desert doesn't care about advanced shields or scanning devices." Sarah thought about her earlier reports to the council. She had called humans primitive because they didn't have city-sized environmental domes or weather control systems. Now she realized they had something perhaps more valuable. They had learned to work with their planet instead of trying to control it. "How long did it take your people to learn all this?" Sarah asked as they rested under a rock overhang. The temperature was rising quickly, but Sarah had shown her how to find the coolest spots. "Thousands of years of trial and error," Sarah replied, sharing some dried fruit from her pack. "Each generation added their knowledge. We passed down stories, songs, and lessons about the desert. Every mistake taught us something new." As they continued their journey, Sarah taught Sarah how to read the sky for weather changes, how to walk without leaving obvious tracks, and how to find edible plants. The alien found herself taking mental notes, not for her conquest report anymore, but because she was genuinely fascinated. "The desert seems empty to outsiders," Sarah said as they watched a lizard dart between rocks. "But it's full of life if you know where to look. Just like humans, we might seem weak at first glance, but we've learned to be strong in ways that aren't obvious." Sarah touched her broken equipment, thinking about how quickly her superior technology had failed her. Perhaps there was more than one kind of advancement, and perhaps she had more to learn from these humans than she could teach them. The sound of engines broke the desert silence. Sarah grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her behind a large boulder. 3 dusty trucks appeared in the distance, driving erratically across the desert floor. "Poachers," Sarah whispered, her expression grim. "They hunt endangered desert animals to sell on the black market, and they don't like witnesses." Sarah reached for her backup beacon, a small device that could signal her ship for extraction. "I can call for help." "No," Sarah hissed, pushing the alien's hand down. "Any signal that powerful will attract attention from your people and mine. Do you want Earth's governments knowing you're here?" The trucks were getting closer. Through the heat waves, Sarah could see men with rifles scanning the area. Her heart raced. Without her defensive systems, she was as vulnerable as any human to their primitive but deadly weapons. "We need to move," Sarah said, studying the landscape. "See those rocks? They're part of an old mining area. Lots of caves and tunnels. We can lose them there." They began moving carefully, using the techniques Sarah had taught Sarah about walking silently and staying low. The alien found herself grateful for these primitive skills, now that her technology wasn't available to hide her. The poachers spotted their movement. A shot rang out, sending rock fragments flying near their heads. Sarah pulled Sarah into a narrow gap between 2 boulders just as more bullets hit the rocks around them. "When I say run, head for that dark spot in the cliff face," Sarah whispered, pulling something from her pack. "It's an old mine entrance." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, watching Sarah take out a small mirror and some matches. "Create a distraction. These guys might have guns, but I have the desert on my side." Sarah lit a small fire using dry brush, then positioned the mirror to reflect sunlight. The combination of smoke and flashing light created the illusion of movement in the opposite direction. The poachers turned their trucks, falling for the trick. "Now." Sarah grabbed Sarah's hand, and they ran for the mine entrance. Behind them, they heard shouts of confusion as the poachers realized they'd been fooled. Inside the mine, Sarah led them through a maze of tunnels she seemed to know by heart. "My grandfather worked these mines," she explained as they moved deeper into the cool darkness. He mapped every tunnel. Those men won't follow us in here. Too easy to get lost forever. Zara looked back at the fading light of the entrance, realizing that once again, human knowledge had proven more valuable than any technology she'd brought from the stars. The old mine tunnel opened into a larger cave, its walls covered with ancient paintings. Sarah lit an emergency lantern, revealing images of people, animals, and symbols drawn thousands of years ago. Native Americans used these caves, Sarah explained, sitting down against the cool wall. They left their stories here, teaching future generations how to survive in the desert. My grandmother taught me to read these walls when I was young. Zara studied the paintings, her three eyes moving across the faded images. There were pictures of people gathering water from plants, tracking animals, and finding shelter from storms. It was a survival manual written in paint and stone. Your people fought the desert and won, Zara said quietly, not by conquering it, but by learning from it. Sarah nodded. Each generation added their knowledge. We lost a lot when European settlers came, but some families, like mine, kept the old wisdom alive. We learned to blend the old ways with new ones. As night fell, the temperature in the cave dropped. Sarah taught Zara how to make a small, smokeless fire. The alien found herself sharing stories too, about her world, her people's endless drive to conquer and control every environment they found. We think we're superior because we can terraform planets and build artificial atmospheres, Sarah admitted. But when our technology fails, a soft beeping interrupted her. The backup beacon on her wrist was activating automatically, its emergency protocol when disconnected from the main systems for too long. Soon, her people would come looking for her. Sarah looked at the blinking device. Your ride's coming, I guess. Zara stood up, facing a decision that would change not just her future, but potentially Earth's as well. The cave paintings seemed to watch her, their ancient wisdom silent but powerful. These caves have kept people safe for thousands of years, Sarah said, understanding in her eyes. They'll keep your secret too. The alien reached for her beacon, her fingers hovering over its controls. In the flickering firelight, surrounded by humanity's ancient knowledge, Zara made her choice. The Centurion Council chamber fell silent as Zara finished her presentation. The giant screens behind her showed data about Earth's deserts, but not the data they had expected. You recommend classifying Earth as a protected world. The head counselor's voice echoed through the chamber. Based on their primitive survival techniques. Zara stood straight, her blue skin still bearing traces of desert tan. Yes, honored council, the humans have mastered something we have forgotten, how to truly understand their environment. She played a recording she had made after disabling her beacon that night in the cave. It showed Sarah teaching her how to find water, read weather patterns, and navigate without technology. The council watched in silence as the images played. We terraform worlds to suit us, Zara continued. We bend environments to our will. But what happens when our technology fails? The humans of Earth's harsh regions have developed strengths we never considered important. One of the younger council members leaned forward. But their technological level is exactly why we should protect them. Zara interrupted. They are developing differently than we did. They're learning to work with their planet, not just control it. This knowledge could be valuable to our own people. The council chambers erupted in discussion. Zara waited, remembering Sarah's last words to her. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is protect what others think is weak. 3 months later, Zara stood before her first class of young scouts. Behind her was a hologram of Earth's Mojave Desert. Today we begin learning what I call groundwork, she announced. You'll learn to read weather without scanners, find water without purifiers, and navigate without computers. One student raised their hand. But why do we need these primitive skills? Zara smiled, touching the small pouch of desert sand she kept as a reminder. Because true strength isn't just about having the best technology. It's about understanding the world around you, adapting to it, and learning from those you might think have nothing to teach. In her quarters, she kept a copy of the official designation she had won for Earth, Protected Status, Class 1, World of Unique Cultural and Environmental Significance. Below it was a simple drawing Sarah had given her, the same kind of art that had decorated the cave walls, showing two figures sharing knowledge beneath a desert sun.